I think this time we have more sessions, and now I think I will introduce the last session because the time is very limited to uh, to I think everyone to use, if you are .NET developer, everyone to use ASP.NET web application to develop. And this time I will introduce our new session speaker Thomas to come here to know some to know to give you some sessions talk about two ways of migration old ASP.NET web applications to .NET 7 or .NET 8. Hi Thomas. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning.
Okay. I will give you I will share your screen and give the mic to you to give us the good session. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for having me here. My name is Thomas Hersek. I'm Microsoft MVP from the Czech Republic, and I have been working with ASP.NET for more than 15 years. So this is what this session will be about. If you have some old applications written on .NET Framework, then there are plenty of ways how you can approach the migration to the newest version of .NET. So I will show you two methods about how you can do that. There's a couple of reasons why you want to move your legacy applications to .NET from .NET Framework to the newest version of .NET, and this conference is full of all kind of reasons, technical reasons, which will help to improve your life. There is also a lot of business reasons why you want to move from .NET Framework to .NET Core or .NET 8. If you have still a web forms applications, it's probably not very easy to find developers who would be willing to write a bunch of new code in such an old technology. So even if that .NET ASP.NET web forms are still supported, still you will probably want to migrate to the newest .NET to get all the benefits and make your developers happy. Before I will dig into the details, like if you have the web forms applications, modernizing them is hard. It's not a one-step process. It's an incremental process that can take weeks or maybe months. So there are a couple of reasons for that. One reason is that the syntax which you are using when implementing pages in ASP.NET Web Forms is completely different from everything else you can see on the new .NET. So the ASPX markup, it's not supported. You have to rewrite the pages and the user controls to some other technology. And the code behind files, which are very closely related, coupled with the ASPX markup, have to be refactored too. So these things, all pages, all markup controls, you have to replace with some other presentation technology. On the other hand, there is a lot of business logic, a lot of code in C#, which is still supported. So if just small changes, you can continue using that, but all the pages and components have to be replaced. Old web forms applications are all often accompanied by other technologies which are also not supported. For example, the old ASP.NET web services or WCF or forms authentication and other things. So this is also what makes this modernization hard, because it's not about replacing only the pages, but also other concepts which have been used in these applications. And I'm not trying to blame anyone. We've all been beginners at the start of our careers, but I have seen a lot of web forms applications which were not very well architected. The business logic was really everywhere, from the like JavaScript in some kind of SPX page down to some stored procedure or database view. So it also complicates the modernization of these applications, because you will have to at some point find this business logic and somehow transfer it to the new application. If it's in the database, it's easy, but still you need to make sure that the business logic is there and it's working well. If it's somewhere in the ASPX page, then it gets much more complicated, and you will spend just hours of your time just looking for where this exact piece of the business logic is located. So it's always a good idea to have the business logic contained in one predictable, obvious place. It can be a separate class library project. It can be just a folder in your project, but it shouldn't be everywhere, because then you will have to look everywhere and pull it to the new place. I will be talking about two methods of migration, and both are incremental. You will be doing page by page or component by component, because it's not possible to do everything at once. The first approach is called side-by-side migration. We will start by creating a separate new application along with the old one, and you will be pulling the pages and the logic from the old application to the new application. The second method I will show is in-place migration, which allows you to do everything in the same project. But of course, from this diagram, you can see that in-place migration should be easier. But of course, when something is better, it means that there are probably some conditions which have to be satisfied. In this case, this way depends on using an open source framework called .vvm, which I will show later. What is interesting here that sometimes you always have to plan this process ahead. You will start by some initial setup, initial configuration. So this is several steps you need to do just to be able to start with the migration itself. Then a quite significant amount of time will be spent on migrating the first piece of code, first page, because there will be a lot of foundational things and challenges you will have to deal with. Then after that, it starts being easier and easier, because if you have migrated something already, then migrating the second, third, fourth page, it's easier. So then it takes a lot of time because there is many pages, but each step is not that complicated as the first steps were. And finally, in the last stage, you have to clean up the remaining artifacts of web forms or the remaining dependencies on all .NET Framework stuff, and you need to prepare the solution for really being finalized. So let's start with the first method, the side-by-side migration. You have probably seen it on other .NET Conf sessions, so I will not dig into details. Basically, you will create a new ASP.NET Core application targeting the newest version of .NET, and you will set up a YARP proxy to basically redirect the requests from the new application to the old application. And then you can pull things from the old application and re-implement them in the new application. And the things which were already been migrated will be like handled by ASP.NET Core. And if some part of the application hasn't been migrated yet, then YARP will redirect the request to the old application. There are several things that can make the initial setup quite complicated. You will have two applications, so you will have to deal with single sign-on experience, share session, make sure the caches are in sync and things like that. So that's why I have added this icon here, because it can be easy, but in some cases it can be very complicated, and you can spend weeks on just making sure that the foundation, the communication between the two applications will be working well. Then you can take one page after another and start migrating them. And this depends on how well your business logic is separated from the rest of the code. If the business logic is in the pages, then it can be quite difficult to take it and extract it as a class library project, so you would be able to share this logic between two applications. If this is too difficult or not possible, you may start copy-pasting the code between the two applications, but I would try to do everything I could to avoid this. I would rather prefer the shared class library project approach. But as I said, sometimes it's too difficult or impossible. When this migration is complete, when you migrate all the functionality from the old app to the new app, then basically the new app contains everything you need. So you can just remove the old app and remove the YARP because you don't need the redirection at all. And that's what should be the last step of this journey. Let's see a short demo how this looks like. I have an web forms application provided to me by my friend, also MVP from the Czech Republic. And as you can see, this is standard web form stuff. There is a web config. You can see it's we are happy we don't have to deal with the session because the application doesn't use session, but it is using forms authentication. It's using membership providers to store the user account information, and there are some other things that will cause some challenges during the migration. And so if you want to start with the side-by-side migration, you should start with installing the .NET Upgrade Assistant extension. And if you right-click on this web form project, you will have this upgrade option here. I have already gone through this process, so if I didn't do it, you would see some kind of wizard like upgrade to the newest version of .NET. It will offer you the side-by-side migration. And what it will do when you click the magic button, it will create a new ASP.NET Core project with this YARP package. And basically, it will prepare the structure for the new project. So in this pipeline, you can see that the last middleware is this map forwarder, and it will basically take all the requests and route them to the alt application. And if you start migration, then you will register your routes before this last middleware. So everything that would be handled by the new application will remain in the new application. And if something hasn't been migrated yet, it will use this forwarder to route the request to the alt application. So this is how the process will start. And then you just need to take all the pages and re-implement them in this new application. Once you are done, you can remove this project and remove the YARP, and everything will be implemented in this new application. There are, as I said, there are some challenges, and it depends what your concrete application is using or not. First challenge can be that you don't want to copy-paste the code from the old app to the new app. So you need to extract it to a class library. The class library should target probably .NET Standard. So you will have to adjust the code before it can be compiled against .NET Standard APIs. But most of the things should be possible to do. But this task can be quite a lot of effort based on how well the business logic is separated from the rest of the code. If the business logic in the old application is everywhere, you will have to go everywhere and take everything to put it in the class library. So this really depends how well architected the old application is. It's possible even in the worst case, but it will mean that it will require more effort. If the application is using session, you will probably need to share the session between the two parts of the application. And sometimes I have seen that people are putting really wild things in the session, including objects which are not serializable. So once you use some kind of session provider which will store the session data in the database, then everything you will put there has to be serializable, ideally in JSON or in some format, because binary serialization doesn't work the same way, or it will not even work on the newest versions of .NET. So this can also mean that you will have to go to 1,000 places in your code base and change how you interact with session. Another challenge can be caching. For performance reasons, you probably have added caching to some places in the old web forms application. But once you change the data, you need to invalidate this cache. And now we have two applications. So if you change the data in one application, you have to notify the other application somehow that probably if it has this data cached, it should invalidate this cache entry, remove it from the cache. So you will have to set up some kind of communication channel, maybe some kind of API for cache invalidation or synchronization, or maybe you can use distributed caching, but of course it also means some kind of refactoring in the alt application. Sometimes the applications interact with the file system, so you will need to make some server configuration to make sure that both applications can access the same folder on the disk to be able to work with the shared file system, because probably both applications will need to interact with that. Or you can replace it with some cloud storage or something like that. And if you have the sign-in experience in the application, you have to create a single sign-on experience, maybe using some external identity provider, because the format of authentication cookies is different between web forms and the new ASP.NET. So these are the challenges you may face. So the initial setup for this side-by-side migration is quite complicated, or can be quite complicated. On the other hand, once you do that, then the migration will go relatively smooth. There are also a lot of benefits. You can use any technology. You have much more freedom because you can use Blazor, React, whatever you like. Even you can do some significant changes, like changing the architecture. If you like clean architecture or domain-driven design, you can do refactoring on the way. The new application can look significantly different to the old application. And because you start with ASP.NET Core project, you can use the new features of .NET from the first day. Just if you have class library which shares the code with the .NET framework, you are still restricted of what .NET framework can do. But in the new parts, you can use the new stuff. The in-place migration is the second method I will be talking about. It requires using open source framework called .VVM, and it's the only web framework for .NET which supports both old .NET and the new .NET Core and 7 and 8 and things like that. So you can use this technology as the migration bridge between these two worlds. Basically, you will need to install .VVM in the project, and then you can do the migration in place. So a lot of challenges I've mentioned on the previous slide doesn't apply to you, because you will not need to make single sign-on. You will still have just one application. You don't need to synchronize caches. It's still one application. You don't need to distribute the session. Still one application. Yeah. So this is the benefit why it makes sense to at least investigate if this would be a viable choice for you. .VVM has extension for Visual Studio 2022 and VS Code. So if you want to have the similar level of developer comfort, you need to install the extension. And the good news is that you don't need to know JavaScript. Same as Blazor, in .VVM, you don't need to write JavaScript code. You are fine with just C# and HTML. The process looks like that. You will install .VVM in the old web forms application. It's just a few NuGet packages that will appear there, and all the web forms thing will still work. But you can add .VVM pages in this project, and you can start rewriting them. It's up to you how quickly you will do that. You can you can just combine these two technologies. Of course, when migrating, you should do some kind of refactoring, because otherwise all the mess that is maybe not necessary will remain in the application after the migration. So you want to remove all the things you don't need. And after you have rewritten all the pages, then you can just remove the web form stuff, because it's already rewritten. And you can just change your CSproj file to target .NET 8. And there are some things that will have to change, like the authentication. Just switch from web forms authentication to ASP.NET Core authentication. But it's just few lines of code that will have to be replaced. And of course, if there are some remaining dependencies on system web, you will have to clean it also before retargeting to .NET 8. So let's see how this looks like. If you go to dotvvm.com and click on this get.vvm, there is an instruction how to install the extension. Basically, you will open the extension manager and search for .vvm and install the extension. Make sure you have the latest updates of Visual Studio, because the extension depends on some libraries from Visual Studio, and it always supports the newest version, the latest update of Visual Studio. So make sure that you update regularly. And this it will add this feature called add.vvm. So if you right click on the web forms application and select add.vvm, it will tell you the steps it will do. So it will install some NuGet packages, create the startup class, and things like that. I will not do it now because I have done it in the second Visual Studio instance. So here is my web forms project. You can see there are still ASPX pages, but together with that, there are also these dot HTML pages, which is the .vvm syntax, .vvm representation of the page. And because .vvm is using the model view model approach, there are also view models for all the pages. So I have took all the pages and rewritten them in .vvm, but it's running in the same app. So still you can use both technologies. The pages can link to each other, no problem. Feel free to use all the time you need. And because it's in the same project, you have the same way of accessing your business logic, your data access. You can do the same thing. If you compare the syntax of web forms on the left side and .vvm on the right side, you can see it's quite similar. .vvm started at 2014, and there was some inspiration by web forms, because one of the motivations for implementing .vvm is to be able to lift and shift the web forms applications to the new versions of .NET. So you can see that this is quite similar. Some controls are missing, like in web forms, there was the multi-view control. In .vvm, you just have two elements, and using the visible property and data binding to the view model, you can switch which part of the user interface would be displayed to the user. So instead of having controls, we are using this data binding syntax, but some things are almost the same, like text box. The controls are similar, but they are using the MVVM experience. So you have data binding here. It's a two-way data binding, so it will work quite naturally. Button is also quite similar. You are also using data binding to call the appropriate command. Validation is also quite similar, just we are not using this required field validators. We are using data annotation attributes, as you will see here. So the markup is not the same, but if you copy paste it and change on few places, you will get the .vvm equivalent. And if you look at the code behind and the view model, it's also quite similar to each other. So as you can see in .vvm, you can use dependency injection. So I need my DB context here, so I will request it in the constructor. Then, because it's MVVM, you have to declare properties for the data binding. So I have two is submitted, which tells the page which part of the UI should be displayed, and this joke text, which is basically the text of the joke I'm trying to submit in my application. And basically, there is the submit button, submit method called by the button. And as you can see also, this is very similar to this. So it's just copy paste with some trivial changes. You don't have to create the instance of DB context because we are using dependency injection here. Instead of accessing the text box text, in MVVM, you are not referencing the particular view components. You are using the data binding. So the value from the text box is bound to this joke text property, and you can just use it. Even the rest of the code is very similar. So it's just copy pasted and slightly refactor. The signature of this method is different. You don't have to call validation itself because .vvm is calling it for you. These are just small changes in the code base. So it's not even a complete rewrite. It's just a lot of small transformations. So that's .vvm and web forms running in the same project. We are still on .NET Framework because we still have web forms in this app. So still the authentication is done like that. I have rewritten the login page to this. So to be able to sign the user in, I have to use the all .NET Framework API forms authentication, set auth cookie, membership, validate user. This will need to be replaced in the final step. If you want some help during the migration, if you go to .vvm.com/webforms, you will see a link for a converter we have created. And this converter basically helps you with transitioning the syntax from web forms to .vvm syntax. So I have pasted my web forms page here. And if you go down and click on continue, it will show some suggestions what you have to change. So for example, this ASP content has to be changed to DOT content. So I have applied this fix. In a web for in .vvm, we don't use run at server. So on 9 places, I will just remove run at server. Text box can be converted to DOT text box. So it's here. You can see it also added the data binding here. Button is also done differently. So you can see DOT button, and we have this data binding here. On this step 3, it also prepares some things that you will need in your view model. So that's what you can use. It doesn't, of course, cover 100% of the changes, but like the most frequent ones are covered. We have been also using ChatGPT because it is aware of .vvm syntax. So in some cases, the Copilot or the ChatGPT can help you with that also. But as I said, the markup is quite similar. So it's not a complete rewrite. The final step can be a bit more complicated because you will have to get rid of all other dependencies on web forms, such as the authentication or configuration. The code will reference something like configuration manager, app settings, connection strings. So this has to be changed to the ASP.NET Core API. So that's what you will have to do at the last step. And I have done it in my last Visual Studio. So after I switched the project, I've just removed the web form stuff, and I have changed this CS proj to target .NET 7 or .NET 8. Then I have to, in login view model, re-implement the login functionality. So in startup, I have added ASP.NET identity using this entity framework store. And in the login view model, I'm injecting the standard sign-in manager from ASP.NET Core identity, and I have just changed this one sign-in method, just few lines of code from the forms authentication to this password sign-in async. That's it. So it's not a significant change, but it can be on several places in your application when you are interacting with the sign-in and things like that. So the same will apply to configuration. Again, you have to go to few places, but once you change this targeting to the project, the compiler will tell you on which places you are using unsupported API. If your web forms application is using third-party components, then .vvm can host React controls. So you can, if your vendor of components have React versions of these controls, you can use them in .vvm. It will allow them to interact with the view model, read data from that. You will be able to respond to things that happen in the React components. So some of our customers are using the grids and things like that. And if you want, you can also check out the commercial offerings on top of .vvm. .vvm itself is open source. All the stuff I have been showing here is available for free. But to make the project long-term sustainable, .vvm also has some commercial products. So you can check them out. They implement a lot of components which you are familiar from other third-party component vendors. So you can choose between the React versions of any library or .vvm commercial product. The last thing I would like to show is the table with comparison. There are two methods, side-by-side migration and the in-place migration. Side-by-side migrations give you a little more freedom because you can use any target framework, target UI technology that you want. It can be Blazor, it can be React, it can be even .vvm because it's still working on ASP.NET Core. And because you will not use the same code base, you will take things from the old part to the new application, then some mess can be kept in the old application and removed eventually. On the other hand, as I said, the initial setup for this can be complicated because you are running two applications and they need to communicate between each other somehow. And if your business logic isn't contained on one place, it may be quite difficult to find it and take it and transfer it to the new application. The in-place migration is easier because you are still in one project and the business logic doesn't have to be changed much. You should do some refactoring on the way, but like you can use the business logic the same way as you did before, but you don't have the freedom. You have to stick to the .vvm framework because that's the only technology which is supported on .NET Framework and .NET 7.8 as at the same time without changing the syntax. Also, this method can be a bit more problematic if you don't have the discipline and if you don't do the refactoring on the way, because nothing forces you from removing the code which is not necessary, because you will still stay in the same project. So you have to keep the discipline and refactor and clean up things which are not necessary. Basically, you will have to review entire code base. This applies to both methods. You should review all the code in the application and make sure that things that are not needed anymore will not be transferred. Otherwise, you will just be piling up the historical mess from the past, which will complicate any action you will need to do with the application. So that's it. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer. And here are some useful links. They will be also posted in the chat. You will find most of the things about the side-by-side migration in the documentation of ASP.NET Core, and we have a lot of materials about the in-place migration on the .vvm.com website /modernize. And of course, download .NET 8 because it's the best release of .NET so far with the greatest performance and other enhancements.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. We have many questions in the common list. I will share the question to you to give some answers. The first question is, give me some time. Wait. Oh, I chose this. Some people want to know a SQL data source control from web form to .NET A. Yeah.
That's my favorite one. SQL data source is not supported in .vvm, and in other technologies there are also no concept like SQL data source. So that's the example of the business logic which is in the ASPX markup. It shouldn't be there. ASPX markup is the presentation layer. Business logic should be in the business layer or something like that. So you have to rewrite it using the SQL command, SQL connection or something like that, or maybe migrate it to entity framework, access, something like that. But there is no technology on the new .NET which would have something similar to SQL data source. This should be moved to some C# equivalent.
Okay, thank you. Another question is the web call view.
www root in the web core new project. I think the upgrade assistant doesn't create it there, but you can do it yourself. You can create the folder www root and it will be there. Yeah, it's just a folder with some special meaning, but it's not mandatory in ASP.NET Core.
Okay. Another question. I think this is very long question.
Okay. Yeah. If you have logic in a .NET Standard library, but there are some parts that cannot be shared because they are accessing the old HTTP context from system web. There are a couple of things you can do. One of them I would recommend is to look at the web forms adapters package, because it's a package which implements this kind of abstraction over the HTTP context to be able to compile it against the ASP.NET Core. So if you will use this package, most of the things, the static members of the HTTP context current and things like that will work because they are implemented in this package like to be able to work with ASP.NET Core. Still, I think that during the migration, it's perfect. But after the migration, you should remove this package and don't use this kind of adapter, because it hurts the testability of your application. So like I would prefer using the iHTTP context accessor or like the native HTTP context from ASP.NET Core. But during the migration, the web forms adapters package is very nice and it helps a lot.
Okay, thank you. But I will choose some question. Oh, this. Many audience to love the migration questions. Yeah, your session is very good. Yeah, so many audience leave some question.
Okay, thanks. For this question, web forms to MVC5 with all logic in .NET Standard libraries, then .NET Core 3. I think you can skip the .NET Core 3 step, actually, because there hasn't been so many changes in between .NET Core 3 and .NET 8. There are plenty of new APIs, but the things which were in .NET Core 3 are also included in .NET 8. So I would maybe skip the stage with .NET Core 3. I would try to migrate directly to .NET 8. There will be still some things, some differences between MVC5 and the MVC on .NET 8, but I think you can safely skip the .NET Core 3 stage. Just go directly to .NET 8.
Okay, the last question. I think you can answer or not answer.
Migration from WPF WinForms other UIs to MAUI. That's a completely different story, maybe for another session. Just to be quick, the MAUI doesn't have the UI designer, and if you have been used to use the designer, then the new modern technologies in the web era and on the mobile space also, they are not the designer is not favorite things for them. So I would prefer just keeping your markup code under control by doing it by hand. It's more work, but I don't have very good experience even with the UI designer in web forms. If you looked at the code which was generated by that, the result wasn't very nice. Same in WPF. It works to some extent, but the generated code doesn't look so nice. It's harder to maintain. The designer sometimes breaks. So I think that we have to get used to writing the UI code by hand.
Okay. I found some people leave the last question to talk about this report viewer.
Oh, I haven't seen an implementation of report viewer in .NET 8, but maybe there is some open source version, same as the WCF doesn't have the official support, but there is an open source core WCF package. So maybe there will be something similar for the report viewer. So I would look for that. Of course, if you will not find any alternative, you can still use iframe and just the report viewer in the web forms or the .NET framework, and the rest of the application migrated to the new stuff. Still, it will help you because there will be less .NET framework code to maintain.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Good answers. Many questions. Your session give us very good samples how to migration the old .NET projects to .NET 8. How to see you in the future in many sharing your experiments to migration. I love this session. Thank you very much. See you.
See you. It was my pleasure. Bye.
Bye bye.